I stumbled upon Theosophy a few years back, and the more I study the teachings of it, the more I come to appreciate it's deep and it's timeless and it's all-encompassing concepts. It has been able to answer all my questions so far. But since the goal of study is more of an ongoing process than a means to an end, I am ever learning. And I want to thank you again for being here so that I could do this talk, because I learned a great deal in it. Theosophy is the path that I have chosen, and in order to develop my spiritual nature, but is not the only path out there, as I learned from doing this study. Theosophy is part of what has been called the wisdom tradition, the ancient wisdom or perennial philosophy. There are many outlets to it, and Theosophy is definitely not the only path. Tonight I will share a snapshot from the research I have done. I noticed that the first talk I gave here I had 34 slides, and this one I had 53. So I had to pare it down a little bit. I think when I go to research stuff, I think I'm giving a weekend seminar on talks, but so yeah. So this is a snapshot, and I definitely recommend that you use this as a jumping off point to your search for happiness, and definitely not the end point of it. So we will get started here. Okay, some basics before we start. A quick course on Theosophy or ancient wisdom. Humanity. Humanity is ever evolving. Our purpose in life is to evolve. We can see our evolution physically through the ages, but we also have a spiritual evolution that we're doing. And the idea is for consciousness to know itself. We start out, and I've talked about in other lectures, or you may have heard it before, it's this U-shape idea. We start out as pure consciousness. We come down and entangle ourselves in matter, get to know what we're not, thereby knowing what we are, and then through our evolution we come back up to the other side. So we're pure spirit or pure consciousness in the beginning, but then after our experience we're pure consciousness in the end. And this is symbolized in the biblical story of the prodigal son. The prodigal son had it good at home, but he didn't know how good he had it until he left home and experienced life, and then came back home, and he really truly knew then what good was. The second one here is from the one to the many. And within this unity, there is a oneness that we all are. And that's not just the people in the Theosophical Society, or just the people in my family, or just the people in our nation. We truly are one, and not an army of individual soldiers, but truly one thing. And when we entangle, or when we came down or fell into matter, we put on separate clothing, per se. So we think that we're separate. We think that these are our thoughts and our emotions and our actions. But our true self is connected with that oneness, and that's the idea, is to learn this higher nature versus our lower nature. Our lower nature is that separation. It is this body, it is this emotions, it is these thoughts. Our higher nature is that more spiritual part of us that is truly that oneness. So through our spiritual path, or our spiritual learning, or our evolution, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to tap into that higher nature so we can truly perceive for ourselves that oneness. And then the three pillars of Theosophy, given to us by Annie Besant, is study, meditation, and service. And as I went through the different traditions, I saw that this wasn't unique to Theosophy, that it was out there all over the place. And for me, it's a really good guideline to give me, things to move towards, or to compartmentalize things, to put things in little compartments. So I can put it in, okay, I've done my study, and I can put it in, I've done my meditation, and I can put it in, I'm doing my service to humanity. So it just makes things easier for me to do. All right, so there are some facts. Annie Besant was our second international president, and she says that happiness is desirable, and it's desirable by every man and every being out there. And we are engaged in the search for happiness. Now, when you talk about happiness, you have to talk about suffering, or you have to talk, when you talk about pleasure, you talk about pain. And she talks here that she is not speaking, or I am not speaking of that pain which no human being in a properly organized society should endure. The pain of starvation, of absolute lack of those necessities of life which preserve the health of the body. Health is necessary to physical happiness, and that's where we can start. So, Abraham Maslow was a modern psychologist, and he created the hierarchy of needs. And this is a theory of the psychological health based on a priority system of human needs. And it starts out at the bottom with our basic needs: our food, our water, our shelter, our sleep. Then once we have those needs met, we can move on up to our safety needs: our safety of our family, our safety of ourself, and the safety of having employment. Social needs are friendship, family, and relationships. Safety, did I mix it up? No, esteem. Esteem is our self-confidence, and that respect that we have for others, and that respect that we're given by others. And then the top is self-actualization. And these are the qualities of a saint, a sage, or a prophet. Now, what we do is we can fluctuate back and forth. Our basic needs may not be met when we don't get enough sleep. Okay? Our safety needs might not be met if we don't have a job at the time, or the job that we have is not producing enough money to meet our basic needs. So any of these not being met is going to kind of cause a glitch in our happiness, okay, or a point at which we really need to take a look at things in a different way. So, Madame Blavatsky, who is a co-founder of the Theosophical Society, says two things, and this is the context of tonight's talk: that neither is theosophy the pursuit of happiness as men understand the word, for the first step is sacrifice, the second is renunciation. So we're talking about sacrifice of our personal needs for those of the greater good, okay? And then renunciation or rejection of the illusions all around us. And one of these illusions is the if only. If only I had this, then I would be happy. Or when I get here, then I will be happy. And when we do that, we create this illusion around us that we don't have what we need right now to create happiness. Okay, on the last one, each of us, or the second one, each of us either adds to or diminishes the sum total of human happiness and human misery, not only of the present, but of every subsequent age of humanity. This, for me, is my responsibility. I feel is my responsibility. This is my driving force to do what I need to do, okay? Because since I am part of the whole, I am responsible for what goes on, or for humanity's happiness, human misery or happiness. Okay, so what is happiness? Well, I Googled happiness, and this is what I got. All right, so be happy, go lucky. This was from the 50s, and this is from now. And I was going to take these out. These were two of the ones that I was deciding whether they should make the cut. But then I thought, this is truly a snapshot of what I'm trying to get across here. These are things that are impermanent. These are things that are, we consume them, and they do make us happy. Drinking a Coke makes us happy. You talk to anybody who smokes cigarette, and they're happy at first. And but then once we stop that happiness goes away, and we need to do it again, and then we need to do it again. And the problem is that after we've consumed these goods for so long, even that loses its happiness. So these are really inevitably the happiness to these things wear off, and we need to find something different. Okay, and there the cycle begins. Okay, so I found some websites, and these were the names of it, and I found some interesting things on a couple of the websites. On the habits of supremely happy people, they said they should happy people surround themselves with other happy people. And I don't know if you all have to be happy at the same time or how you find happy people. But they try to be happy. I don't think most of us try to be sad or unpleasant. But this was the kicker. They have a good mixtape or music. So that's one of the important things. So if any of you fit those bill, I would like you to be my group of my friends. At behappy.me, they say be optimistic, follow your gut, own yourself, and make enough money to meet your basic needs. That's food, clothing, and shelter. And here in the United States, that's $60,000. That's what they say. So in our family of 4, we can almost be happy once every 4 days. Okay. And then the last one, this was the only website that I found, they say get intimate with your own mind, practice compassion at every moment, connect with others who support your journey, and embrace death, don't fear it. And I thought this was interesting because our fear is based out of our feeling of separateness. Our fear is based out of when we feel that this body and these emotions and these thoughts are who we are. Because on the physical plane, there naturally is a limit. There's only so many resources. There's only so much money we can make. There's only so big of a car I can buy or big of a house I can afford. And so it's limited to what we have. But when we can tap into that higher nature, we're in a limitless field to receive whatever's out there and thereby passing up on the limitations. So, definitions. I found some regular definitions of happiness, the state of being happy, contentment, fortunate, and convenient. And then modern science defines happiness as the positive range of emotions that we feel when we are content or full of joy. I didn't like these because they seemed too fleeting for me. So this is what I found I named it an uncommon definition. A gentleman named Pascal Bruckner is a French philosopher. And I listened to a talk, and what he says is happiness is a moment of grace and joy in life. It's a different quality of life than the ordinary days. It's feeling we are going in the right direction. And then grace is something that comes on you. It is an unexpected and special quality that will not come back, but that you will always remember, a moment rather than a permanent state. And that's what I think one of the important parts that I want to make sure I get across is I think the idea is for us to find our own definition of happiness, what that is. For some people, it's laughing. For other people, it's just being content with what they have, okay? I would probably call it more of an equanimity, is what I would like to get to. And then this is just, we'll go over this in the other slides, so I'm going to skip over it. So, in ancient religions, what I did was I picked 3 ancient religions and kind of just gave a summary of it. In Hinduism, Hinduism is called the oldest religion in the world that is still being practiced. It is a synthesis of various Hindu cultures and traditions with diverse roots and no single founder. Basically, it's India-ism, okay? And what they say here is that, I'm just going to summarize all the quotes together, is that Hinduism teaches that happiness doesn't depend on any object. It is going beyond the physical and surrendering to the divine. And then I went to the Bhagavad Gita to try and find what they say about happiness. The Bhagavad Gita translates to the Song of the Bhagavan, and Bhagavan is just an honorific title for great person. It is a sacred text of the Hindus and is the dialogue between Prince Arjuna and his guide, Lord Krishna. What the teachings say are there are three qualities in Hinduism found in everything that's out there. They're called the Gunas. One of those qualities is a restlessness or activity. The other is a laziness or inactivity. And the third is a balance between those two. And we can see those qualities in people, and if we really think about them, we can see them in other things also, or processes of that. So, the first one that Lord Krishna tells Prince Arjuna is that happiness, which is derived from contact of the senses, their objects, and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be the nature of passion. This is that activity, or that restless quality. And this is also the pleasure, the nature of pleasure. The second one, that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be the nature of ignorance. This goes around with the ignorance is bliss type thing. So this is a laziness or an inactivity to search out, to try and figure out who we are, and to be happy in this state. The third one is happiness through struggle, all right, through detachment of the senses and knowledge of our true self. And this is the true, said to be happiness of the mode of goodness. And this is the balance. This is the third quality. Buddhism. Buddhism is based on the teachings of the Buddha. And the Buddha said, life is suffering. Okay? And suffering arises from craving. Suffering can be eliminated, and in order to eliminate suffering, you have to do these 8 things, or work on these 8 things. So those are the 4 noble truths. And what I saw here that I thought was interesting is that if you look at the right view and the right intention, they're labeled wisdom or study. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood are labeled ethical conduct or service to humanity. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration is labeled mental cultivation, and that's meditation. So right there we have our study, our service, and our meditation. All right, Confucianism. Confucianism started with Confucius, and he was a Chinese teacher, editor, politician, and philosopher. And he states here that study and practice implies, study and practice, isn't it a joy to study and regularly practice? It implies here that it's something that we have to work for. And then if a man takes no thought about what is distance, he will find sorrow near at hand. This is, to me, this was talking about the timelessness, instant gratification versus what we're looking for in the future. And then the last one is we should feel sorrow, but not sink under its oppression. And so nowhere does he think that there shouldn't be sorrow. And sometimes we think that there shouldn't be sorrow in our life. There shouldn't be pain. There shouldn't be unpleasantness. And if there is, we've done something wrong. But many of these traditions will say, there is going to be sorrow, there is going to be pain, there is going to be uncomfortableness. It's all a part of life, and it has a purpose. Okay, next we have Mencius. Mencius came about 100 years after Confucius, and he's known as one of the greatest Confucians, besides Confucius himself. And what he says here, the first one talks about our higher nature versus our lower nature. The second quote talks about our senses being not rational. Yet we let our actions be dictated by our senses. And when we use the rational qualities of our mind, we can see through these misperceptions. And thereby our actions will become more in line with the right action. All right, Taoism. Taoism tells us that ultimate happiness is nothing but wu wei, the skill of doing nothing against the way. Lao Tzu is a contemporary of Confucius, and he wrote the book, the Tao Te Ching. He says here the physical world is limited by its very nature. And once all we have to do is try and desire things, and we find its limitations. Then do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear? I really liked this quote because we want results now. We want to see the results of our actions, whether it be fame, fortune, power, respect. But many times we're too busy creating waves of discomfort to see what our undertakings have brought to us. If we are not actually, if we do not have patience, or if we could find that patience and stop flailing around, I felt like we would see that we're not really drowning, and we could stand up because the water is only up to our waist. But we're so busy, our mind, which by nature is discontent, okay? And it creates more discontent. So we're murkying up the water, and we never give it time to settle out for us to see some of the fruits of our nature. And the other thing here, too, it's like trying to, parenting, it's like trying to decide or see if I've done a good job parenting while I'm in the middle of parenting my children while they're teenagers, or while they're a 2-year-old and having a 2-year-old tantrum. So it's something that will take time and that will settle out. And the other thing with that, sometimes when things settle out, it's not how we think they were going to be. But if we've done everything that we can, then the results we have to let the results go. All right, this next guy, Zhuang Zhu. You know how many times I had to practice that. Zhuang Zhu was known as an influential Chinese philosopher. And what he says here is, this is kind of what the Tao is about. It's the flow. Flow with whatever may happen and let your mind be free. Stay centered by accepting whatever you are doing. This is the ultimate. There's an example that I read in one of the teachings about even the jobs that we do. We need to be more accepting of what's in front of us. And he talked about a job of a gentleman who his job was to chop up the meat, kill the animal, chop up the meat. And he did it in such a way that that was his spiritual path. He was able to do that. So if we can go along with what life brings us and stop trying to change things, stop complaining, stop making judgments about these, then our thoughts and our emotions will turn naturally away from conflict. All right, on to the ancient Greek philosophers. Okay.
You skipped the quote at the bottom.
I think it was, happiness is the absence of striving for happiness, yes. So, all right, Socrates. I am going to skip many things, so don't call me on them here. All right, most of our knowledge of Socrates comes from the teachings of Plato, or the writings of Plato. And Plato was his student. So what Socrates says is we naturally desire happiness. Happiness is obtainable and teachable, but it takes work. Happiness depends not on external goods, but how we use them. Happiness depends on the education of desire. That education will take us from physical pleasure, away from physical pleasure, and towards the love of knowledge and virtue. And we can't have happiness without virtue, And then the last one. The pleasures that result from pursuing virtue and knowledge are of a higher quality than the pleasures resulting from satisfying mere animal desires. Pleasure is not the goal of existence, however, but rather an integral aspect of the exercise of virtue in a fully human life. Now, one thing, it was really interesting to me, I had never studied much of Greek philosophy, but to learn about their philosophy and the Athenian culture. The Athenian culture at this time put a lot of emphasis on its citizens and making those citizens as whole as possible, and through their education. Their education was all-encompassing. And I remember seeing this in the Chinese also. So you learn art, and you learn music, and you learn physical agility. So the same with the Athenians. Their goal was to make soldiers out of everybody and to make politicians. Their idea of a democracy was of the people, for the people, by the people, and it truly was, because their assembly had many of the citizens. It was your duty as a man, and now I'm talking about just the men, because the women and the slaves didn't count, so just the men. But your duty was for the whole. It was for the Athenian people. And so to be exiled from that, if you did wrong or you were called a traitor, was a huge thing to them. So they were taught morality. These plays that we hear, you were obligated to go to them because they taught about morality, they taught about ethics, they taught about how living in a whole society should be, and what that advantage was. So that's the basis of this, and this makes sense. Everything Socrates says makes sense for that goal. Now, Aristotle was a student of Plato's. And Aristotle says happiness is the ultimate end and purpose of existence. It's not a pleasure, it's not a virtue, but once again, it's the exercise of a virtue. Happiness cannot be achieved until the end of one's life. Hence, it is a goal and not a temporary state. Perfection of human nature. Happiness is the perfection of human nature, and since man is a rational animal, happiness depends on the exercise of reason. But we can't exercise our reason if we don't know what reason is, and we don't know what exercises are needed to make it strong. So the Athenian culture took care of that. They taught you how to exercise your reason. That was part of your education as a citizen of Athens. And we don't do that nowadays. We don't teach virtues. We don't teach ethics. We assume they're learning those things, and we're not. It's obvious that we're not learning those things. I know Vic Hao Chen, who is a theosophist from the Philippines, has a school, and that's one of the things his schools focuses on is the teaching of ethics. Then we have, through acquiring moral character, we strike a balance between excess and deficiency. And then the last one talks about intellectual contemplation, and this is a meditation. All right, now, this dude here, Epicurus, between the time of Aristotle and Epicurus was, 40 years. And this is 60 years after the war between Sparta and Athens. And that war was 30 years long, and it took a huge toll on both communities. The Spartans lost 1 and 2 men of fighting age, and the Athenians lost 1 and 4. The best we can compare to is in World War II, the Germans lost 1 and 13 men. So it really devastated their community, and it takes a toll. And the gentleman I listened to in a talk said that a shift happened in the Athenian people. They no longer felt that it was their civic duty to be a soldier. So they hired a military. They hired professional military. They no longer wanted the hassle of being a politician, so they hired politicians to do that. Therefore, they had more free time. And in this free time, they used it more for seeking pleasure. And Epicurus, who was a philosopher at this time, kind of mirrors that. Happiness is pleasure. All things are to be done for the sake of the pleasant feelings associated with them. And now that's a big shift from Aristotle and Socrates, and even the ancient religions. It's getting away from that. Now, what he did say was that he recommended that this pleasure be towards higher things or spiritual things, but if you can't get there, it's okay. Just work on that pleasure. So thereby you're leaving it open for interpretation, and that's kind of, as we can see nowadays, that's a little scary territory. All right, we move from philosophy to religions of the book. Christianity. I chose Thomas Aquinas and some quotes that he has here. He talks about two kinds of happiness, a perfect happiness and an imperfect happiness. The first one, the perfect happiness, is not possible during this lifetime. It's something that is achieved as a direct perception of God, okay? And it's for the afterlife. But we can have imperfect happiness during this lifetime, and it's in proportion to this exercise of reason, this contemplation of truth, all right? It's not an acquiring, okay, and virtue. I'm going to go down to number 4. There is an important distinction between enjoyment and happiness. Enjoyment concerns satisfaction of worldly desire. Happiness concerns obtaining our absolute perfection, which by definition can only be found in the absolute being, which is God. So what he's saying here is what we're working on is getting away from that personal nature and tapping into our higher nature. The third one is just about virtues, and I have a pretty little slide that shows all kinds of virtues. So in Judaism, Rabbi Leibovitz was a spiritual leader of an educational institution, of a Jewish educational institution in Poland. He inspired those who survived World War II to become leaders and teachers of the Jewish schools in America and Israel. And that was really important at that time because their tradition or their culture was being wiped out. So these people were able to leave, those that survived, and bring back the culture and the traditions of the Jewish population. And what he says here is that we are born into a particular family, a particular culture, or a particular nation. And all those have certain ways of looking at things. And these perceptions are filtered by the lens of the past. Many of our actions, emotions, and thoughts are due to past conditionings. A small minority will really care to investigate why we do what we do, why we think what we think, and why we feel what we feel. And those people that choose to do this will take a critical look at each and everything and try to understand everything as it really is, instead of accepting the general prevalent outlook. Those who try to investigate the origin of every perspective will perceive everything in a much different light that is commonly accepted. And Krishnamurti talks about this conditioning of the mind. And our mind is conditioned, and so we have these prejudices, we have these judgments, we have these ways of looking at things. By watching them and wondering, where did that thought come from? How come I want to eat? One thing I ask my kids, one thing I ask my kids when I just made dinner, just washed the dishes, and someone comes back in and look in the refrigerator, I'm asking, why are you hungry? And so one time I asked them, are you hungry because you're bored? And now when they come in, I'll say, why are you hungry? Oh, I'm bored, forget it, and I'll walk out. They'll walk out. So that is how I picture that. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I doing it out of habit? Am I doing it because my mom did it? Am I doing it because, my friends are all doing it? Why am I doing what I'm doing? When we ask those questions and we take that time for contemplation, then we can go back to the source and see where the root of it is, and if it's necessary, if it's a necessary part of our life. So, okay, Islam. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. The aim of moral discipline is to purify the heart from the rust of passion and resentment, till like a clear mirror, it reflects the light of God. Mr. Ghazali, al-Ghazali, is a Muslim theologian, philosopher, and Sufi mystic. And so do we have the ability, in this resentment part, do we have the ability to look small and be at the back of the line without resentment, without bitterness, without anger? And that was the whole idea of it, because we're okay, we can be happy if we're at the front of the line and we're looking big, or we like our job, or things are going smoothly with our relationships. That's when it's easy to do that. But can we do that when we're small and at the back of the line, when we're doing a job that we don't like, or when our relationships aren't going well? Okay, that's when we're working on. That's the time we work on getting rid of those resentments, that bitterness and that anger, thereby cleaning off the mirror. Number 3, there are examples in history of truly happy people, and they were prophets, people who have attained a perfect union until ultimate union with ultimate reality. We are happy to the degree to which we can emulate these prophets. Okay? So these are the prophets, the sages, the saints that we can try and emulate, and as close as we can emulate their behavior is as much happiness as we can find. And then, this knowing pain of the soul. This is the emptiness. This is the void. This is what motivates people to get off their path of what's a habit, their habitual path, and look for something deeper. Now, we can either find something that's superficial and that can fill that void to begin with, but like we saw, that nectar will turn into a poison, or we can resolve that pain by looking for something that's spiritual, that's truly seeking, that's harder work. Okay, Theosophy. Krishnamurti.
Which one is it?
This one's Krishnamurti, the guy with his hands together. Okay? All right, Krishnamurti was an author and lecturer on spiritual and philosophical subjects. He had a major impact on 20th century thought. And he was, you think of Krishnamurti and you definitely don't think of happiness, okay? He is one of those, his teachings are something that's basically in your face. If you're angry, well, look at that anger and then see what makes you angrier and keep watching that anger. If you're not happy with somebody, well, go be with them and figure out why you're not happy with them. And so he will never tell you, just leave it. That's okay. It's not important. Just walk away. So I always think he'll like rub your face in it until you're scared of spiders, so he'll put you in a room with spiders to get over it. But for me, it's hard to understand Krishnamurti by itself. But with a basis of theosophy and knowing those few things in the beginning, it really helped me to understand his teachings. So he says happiness cannot be pursued. You can't seek it. It will evade you. That's a timeless thing. If you love something, let it go. That same type of principle. The second one, though, he talks about duality, the duality of nature. Okay? If there's good, there's bad. If we're seeking happiness, we're going to find pain. And this, he says here, I am unhappy and I must be happy. Or we're worried because we have worries. Or I'm angry because I keep getting angry. What he suggests doing, or what he says is to know yourself so completely that your mind is no longer seeking. Because what produces most of our sorrow is our mind, and its ever-changing thirst for things. And you notice that when you're sitting there, and I decided that after reading this that I can't complain. I can't gripe, I can't complain, and I can't talk about people. That doesn't leave a whole lot to talk about in a conversation with people, unless I'm talking like Theosophy. And how many people can I talk Theosophy with? So it really limits your conversation. And I notice that there are times when I'm sitting with people and we're just sitting there and we're having a nice time and we're talking about, but those elementals that come along with it want to dig up some dirt. I want to talk about somebody. I want to hear some gossip. And through watching it long enough, I can say, okay, no, this is not me. This is not who I am. This is just some crazy energy that's around me. That's a habit. And so that's what he's saying here. If I'm constantly saying I'm unhappy because I'm not happy, then I'm still in that duality of it. I'm still looking at opposites. But if I watch my unhappiness, and I truly watch it and I take the time to watch it and just describe it and see what it is and see where it's going and what it does, then eventually it will disappear. So the book says. No, I have seen that happen. I have tried that myself with anger, and it will go away because if I watch and I follow and I see where that's going. So his main approach is to start watching our mind. The state of awareness. The state of awareness produces order in the chaotic mind. So this very just awareness, and it's a simple awareness, will help settle that murky water. Okay? We seek happiness through things, through relationship, through thoughts, ideas. So things, relationship, and ideas become all important and not happiness. And what he explains here, he gives an example, is if I put my happiness or my pleasure in a chair, I'm looking forward to sitting in that chair. That chair is going to be very comfortable to me. And then I come in the room and somebody's sitting in my chair. Then I'm not happy because I'm not happy because of the chair. It has nothing to do with I'm uncomfortable, that I have to sit on the floor. It has more to do with I don't have that chair. And remember that we're in a world of limits, a world where other people are there. Our mind goes to, that person is sitting in that chair just to make me mad. They knew I wanted that chair because that's the best chair. So our mind starts going and it's going, and all of a sudden this person has a vendetta out to kill us to keep the chair. And it's all over the chair, where really that person may have just walked in and it was the first chair they saw and they sat down. One of the things, we had a discussion in a group one time, that people really don't think about us as much as we think they do. That they really don't care about us. That person that cut me off in traffic has no idea who I am, has no idea what kind of car they even cut off. They were just in a hurry. So if we can start interrupting our thoughts with those more rational thinking, then we can hopefully cut off that process that just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. Okay. Next, we have HPB. Madame Blavatsky was instrumental in bringing spiritual wisdom of the East and that of ancient Western mysteries to the modern West. One thing I did learn back in the start of the Theosophical Society, when the TS moved to India, made their international headquarters there, they had a lot of students who were of Indian nature, so Indian nationality. So they grew up with Hinduism or Buddhism, and so they understood these timeless, these life answering questions, or answers to life answering questions. They understood this as they were raised with it. So these Westerners came over, and they came over with a more of a materialistic view without this ancient wisdom, and they wanted to be students of Theosophy or students of students of Theosophy. And what some of the Indian members resented giving them this knowledge because they wouldn't know how to use it properly. And that made perfect sense to me because for the longest time I thought I was happy, I was a good person, I was kind, I was charitable, and I thought that's all I needed to get me through life. And then when I learned these other concepts, it really opened up a whole new depth of a part of me where the happiness that I had was more of a superficial nature. So a tragedy or a conflict would throw it off. And what I'm hoping by this studying is that happiness that I have is more concrete, more solid, so I won't get thrown off. So HPB says that there's 3 levels of desire. This first one, when desire is for the purely abstract, when it has lost all trace or tinge of self, then it has become pure. This is that spiritual, that desire for spiritual pleasure. The second one is the first step towards this purity is to kill out the desire for things of matter, since these can only be enjoyed by the separated personality. This is the material pleasure. The second is to cease from desiring for oneself even such abstractions as power, knowledge, love, happiness, or fame, for they are but selfishness after all. And these are more pleasure for abstractions. They're still seeking of a lower nature, but they're not things. Okay. The effort to assimilate the individual with the universal law is let me start over. Sorry about this. It's the last sentence in there. The effort to assimilate the individual with the universal law is popularly known as the practice of morality. And that goes back to the Greek philosophers about their schools of ethics. And then the last one, she says, it is only when the whole of humanity has attained happiness that the individual can hope to become permanently happy. For the individual is an inseparable part of the whole. Every time we suffer, we survive, and we thrive, we are doing a service for humanity. And these are one of the greatest services for humanity because we ease the burden of the suffering for those who are unable to thrive at that time. Let me go through modern psychology real quick and then we'll be done. Modern psychology, as well as modern medicine, have many great things. I believe that they have the ability to bring us from sickness to unsick, or from unhealthy to a more healthy state. But it is our job to go from unsickness to wellness. And this takes work, this takes effort. The teachings, the stuff that I found for modern psychology seemed to me to be a little further from the source and a little more superficial. But I'm not a psychologist. I didn't study psychology, so I know there's deeper stuff in there. But someone needs to reread their stuff and kind of fix it up a bit. So this gentleman here, Michele, okay, he talks about the state of flow. The state of flow is equivalent to being in the zone in athletics. And it's when you're completely absorbed in things. Now, this I wouldn't call a state of happiness, but this is definitely an admirable state, or a state that I would like that I like to get to. It's where you're most productive. It's where you're most creative. And then he says to set goals, to be immersed in a particular activity, to pay attention, learning to enjoy the immediate experience. I'm sure right here he means more mindfulness than instant gratification. Okay, I'm hoping anyway. And then proportioning one's skills to the challenge at hand. We all have skills that can work at certain things and not so strong at others. And if we can channel those things to the right area, we'll have more success. Now, Martin Seligman, happiness has 3 dimensions that can be cultivated: the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. The pleasant life is changing our pursuing the positive emotions about the past, present, and future. I'm not sure how you would do that, because there are some emotions that, some things that happened in the past that just saying, okay, I would hate for it to be negating something that happened in the past, because it doesn't work when we are going through something really tough if we just say, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. Okay, that definitely isn't going to bring happiness. So the good life, using the signature strengths to obtain abundant gratification. I have a problem with abundance. I know a lot in the New Age movement talks about abundance. We're just gathering more stuff for ourselves. Even if it's not stuff and it's power or money or being at the front of the line and being tall, that's still selfish. The meaningful life, using your signature strengths and virtues in the service of something much larger than you. All right, Ed Diener underlines 4 central ingredients for a happy life. Psychological wealth is more than money. It's your attitude, goals, and engaging activities at work. I'm not sure what he would say if you don't have engaging activities at work. If you're, I tried to think, what if I'm a ditch digger? Or what if I am that hog slayer and I have to do that? So I'd like to see how to twist that to make that engaging. But like I said, if you go back to the Chinese philosophy, they talked about being present and being whole and being there no matter what you're doing. Happiness not only feels good, but is beneficial to relationships, work, and health. I'm just going to skip over that one. Yeah, that's like a chicken and the egg thing. So I'm not sure how to address that. But it's helpful to set realistic expectations about happiness. No one is intensely happy all the time. And thinking is an important aspect to happiness. I'm going to say that he means deep thinking, intellectual contemplation, okay, deep studying. It's that rational thinking of the higher mind. All right, so practice. These are the virtues. I put all the virtues from all the different areas together. Some people take a virtue and learn 1 virtue a week or 1 virtue a month, and really look into what it is, really focus on what it means, really think about what in my life am I doing that brings this virtue to me, what am I doing that's not bringing the virtue. Emotions. Emotions. There are, on the top part are the emotions that bring us away from happiness, and the bottom are the emotions that would bring us closer to happiness. When disturbed by negative thoughts, one should remove them by contemplating on the opposite. That is one way, that is one type of meditation. Annie Besson has a meditation on virtues that is similar to this. And then this is my goal. I want to be like a tree. I walk from here, my house, to here in all different weathers and all different kind of weather, and I never see a tree shivering when it's cold, or I never see it crying, or I never see it complaining when it's too hot. So I thought, so when I can think of something besides my own personal woes, I think I would like to be like a tree. And, the wind comes along and knocks a few dead branches off, and it just goes on. It just goes. And it doesn't even mind if a fire comes by and burns it to the ground, because it knows, it doesn't fear death. It knows that all it has to do is be reabsorbed into the soil, and it's back to its oneness, and then eventually it'll be a tree again. Or maybe not, but. Okay. I should end it here. Okay. That's it. The other thing that I wanted to end with is that our society, more or less today, thinks it's our duty or our entitlement to happiness. And if we're not happy, we must be doing something wrong. And sometimes the only thing we can do is endure, is bow our head, grit our teeth, get up in the morning, and keep moving. And that, by doing that, we've done a service to humanity, because we've survived that one day. And all we have to do is do it the next day after. And if we study deep enough, or just even look at nature, we see that nature goes in cycles. Well, so do our moods, so does our happiness, so does our depression, so does our anger. It goes in moods. And if we can just ride the storm out, that too shall pass. So, thank you.
I was just reflecting on some of the things you said and thinking about the last 2 weeks we've talked about suffering, and now you're up there talking about happiness. And the thing that really comes to my mind again is this idea of acceptance. So when you're in pain, accepting that you're in pain leads you to not suffer as much. But even being a ditch digger, to accept this is my life, these are the things that are good in my life. I have a stable job, I have a family, I meet those basic needs. That's the way that accepting where I am, I can be happy instead of always grasping for something else and wanting something else, and that craving that Buddhism talks about that brings us back.
Right.
So acceptance seems to be on both sides of the coin.
Yeah, for getting away from pain or accepting the pain, and then getting away more towards happiness. No, you're absolutely right.
Have you heard the quote, be like a tree and leave?
Ah! I'll remember that one now.
So.
Oh, no, that's it. You only get one thing.
So, it's interesting that while you were reading the psychology one, there was a lot of skepticism and criticism, while all the other crazy ideas that other people had, you were, well, this is an idea. Here's another idea. Here's a different idea. Lots of people have lots of ideas about happiness.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's why I tried to preface as it has a lot of purpose. I haven't found it in there. I had a friend tell me we were in a class and the teacher walked in and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry I'm late. I just came from a therapy appointment." And we must have given her a look like, "Why are you in therapy? You don't look crazy." And she goes, "Oh, therapy is great. Everyone should go to therapy. It's like a mental massage." And she's right. It definitely has its purpose. And but I think from my experience, I think there's a point where I needed to stop talking and I needed to start putting some things into action. And I found that the times that I had talked to a therapist, one apologized after one meeting because I left kind of upset, and she says, "I'm sorry that I didn't support you." And I said, "You don't have to make me happy. That's not your job. That's not why I'm paying you. I'm trying to work things out. So if you anger me or frustrate me or upset me, that's okay because it worked something out." And the other one I went to said, "Okay, you tell me what you want. Do you want to?" And this was for a friend of mine. I was going to go with her. He said, "Do you want to be married? Do you want to not be married? Or do you want to work through something else? Those." And I thought, you're just. It had nothing to do with what the right thing was or what the best thing was. It's what she wanted, what she wanted to go through, what she wanted her end result, and he could, trade it to that. And then the other experience that I personally had was I went to a therapist once, and I remember this because I was paying cash. And she said, close your eyes and meditate. So I closed my eyes. I heard her doing paperwork. And all I could think of, what I was meditating on was, I am paying $70 of my own money, and she's just having me close my eyes. She didn't give me any guidance or anything. So it's a hard process to find a therapist that you like. And you know, like I said, the other ones I've gone to, I found, you know, a very good need. Yes.
Yes, one thing that the difference to me is in the concept of happiness. Sometimes modern psychology looks at happiness more as a state of where you are okay with life. And when we read the ancient traditions, the idea of happiness is something that is far deeper, and therefore it needs a different kind of work. So to me, even though the two of them call the same, you know, that happiness, call them in the same way, they are talking about different things. So that's why if we look at psychology thinking that they are trying to describe a path that will lead to the other kind of happiness that we think of, then it will seem inappropriate.
Right.
I was thinking about this all along while you were talking. Happiness is a wonderful thing, but I'm thinking, what does that go along with satisfaction? I was thinking, well, satisfaction would think, well, that means an end to happiness, so maybe satisfaction, I'm thinking to myself, should be removed so that happiness can thrive, can grow, and not be a permanent thing. So that's what...
Right. Well, and like I said, too, that's something that is personal, because satisfaction to me is being satisfied with something, not necessarily being happy about it. So we really need to work on this on our own and come to what we think it is.
So in the non-dual tradition, happiness is built in to the whole.
Right.
And so it's built into the higher self. And it's just a matter of, well, they say it's ignorance that prevents us from seeing the already presence of happiness.
Right, but I have a hard time with that being happiness, that spiritual bliss being called happiness. Because to me, happiness has an opposite, unhappiness. And so that one nature that's of our higher self, just semantics, just by the word of happiness, doesn't seem like it could be happiness. It has to be something beyond that. It has to be something more than that, because happiness is used all over the place for regular stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, the question is whether you're going to use the dual happiness, that's the opposite of unhappiness, and that fluctuates between. Most people use pleasure and pain for those terms, and use happiness as a permanent condition, not a permanent description of who you really are.
But I see a problem with that, because if you bring that happiness that is a permanent description of who you really are, and we don't fully understand that other nature, then we bring that down to the material, down to our lower nature, and we say, okay, happiness is permanent. Happiness is there all the time. Happiness is my true nature. And then we start grabbing at stuff to make us happy. So I think you have to have...
There's no grabbing.
Oh, no, I understand that. But what we do is we bring a higher order concept and we bring it down to the lower nature. So we really have to have some education. We have to be taught that there's something beyond, you know, do this, don't do this, and really get to those intellectual concepts or that contemplation.